today I want to jump in and I want to lay a foundation. I want to lay a foundation for a clear understanding of when we understand our purpose in Christ. What we have to do is understand that when God gives us a purpose and a calling, he goes with us, he goes before us, he's always beside us. We're never walking through this alone, and we can walk with boldness and confidence because that's what he tells us to do in Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. It says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so will I be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the left or to the right, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Let me tell you this morning, as you step out in purpose, you can be strong and courageous because God promises he will go with you and before you wherever you go. So to begin with this morning, as we launch into more than enough purpose, we have to understand that as we launch into purpose, we can do it with authority and with power and strength. The dangerous part is that so many people don't understand their purpose or their calling. So you end up with things like, I think about, I'm a car guy, and when I say I'm a car guy, I don't mean that I'm a hot rod guy or I'm a motorsports. I am for sure, but it's not just sports cars I like. I can spot any car on the road if I haven't seen it. If it's a new station wagon, but I haven't seen it before, I have to know who made it. And what are the specs? Like, what's the deal with that car? Who made it? What's the deal with that car? And so several years ago, it's been several years now, Toyota came out with the Avalon. And the Avalon, of course, Toyota owns Lexus, so if you get to a really nice Toyota, they usually have a Lexus badge instead of a Toyota badge. But Toyota came out with an Avalon, and the Avalon was the highest level, all the bells and whistles, fancy, the fanciest Toyota you could get and still get the Toyota name badge. And so when they first came out, I noticed what they are. I'm finding out. I'm doing the research, like, okay, what car is that? I find out about it. And now my eye is, like, looking for them everywhere I see them. Well, I'm driving through McKinney, and a brand new Toyota Avalon pulls out in front of me. And when I say brand new, I think it might have still had paper tags on it. But it already had a bumper sticker. Just one. So what is it that this guy with this really nice, fancy, expensive car, what's the one thing he had to proclaim to the world? What's the one thing on his mind he wants you to know most about him? The bumper sticker said, I'm a smoker and I vote. That's what you want to say to the world. That's it. I want to make sure you know this one thing about me. It's super important to me that you know that I'm a smoker and I vote. Just heads up, you got to know I'm a smoker and I vote. Just so you know. When we do not understand our purpose and our calling, we can begin to identify ourselves in unhealthy ways. Our personal bent becomes our identity, and that is so dangerous because the truth of the matter is when we don't understand our destiny and our purpose and our calling, we begin to just, what is about me that's different? What is about me that sets me apart? And you begin to identify and set your flag in the ground on that ground. And they'll do it even if we don't understand our purpose and identity. We'll do that even with a vice. Nobody grows up and says, someday I can't wait till I can start smoking. Nobody does that. But we get so caught up in, I'm not sure what I'm really supposed to be living for, that I live for whatever's in front of me. And oh, by the way, this is my thing. I'm a smoker and I vote. Man, if we would just understand that when we shrink our world down to the size of our personal issues, we've missed the mark because God's purpose and plan for us is so much bigger than that. If we don't understand we're made for a purpose, then the bumps and bruises of life begin to reduce our personal value. An example would be if you're in this COVID season and quarantine season and it's caused your company to maybe lay you off, or even maybe you just had some pay cuts. When guys don't understand, when men in particular don't understand their personal purpose, their calling, the reason God put them on the earth, they will begin to associate themselves and put their value in how much they're being paid. And the dangerous part of that is when a pay cut comes, then you begin to see yourself as worth less. I was worth this, now I'm only worth this. And it's because we've identified, we put our identity, our destiny, our purpose. When we don't understand what our purpose is, we'll begin to identify with all the wrong things. And so guys begin to struggle when we get pay cuts and things like that, because it's an attack against our self-worth. It's an attack against our value, and we struggle with that. As a matter of fact, we can so struggle with that as the bumps and bruises continue to come, and we see ourselves as worth a little less and worth a little less, at some point we begin to see ourselves as worthless. It is critical that we understand that you have, and not just some of you, but every one of you have a purpose and a calling. Yeah. None of you are without it. If you don't know what it is, that's okay. Hold on. But be aware that you're in a dangerous season. Because if you don't know what your purpose and calling is, the world is ready to tell you. The world is ready to tell you in about 1,000 different ways what your purpose and your calling is. But you were made for a purpose. I know that because of Jeremiah 1, verses 5 through 10. It says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Alas, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak. Look at this. The Spirit of God is talking to Jeremiah. It says, before I ever formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. And oh, by the way, you're going to speak for me. And what's the very first thing he says? Well, I can't speak. And oh, by the way, I'm also too young. But the Lord said to me, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to, and say whatever I command you. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you to. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord. Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put my words in your mouth. So when he said, I can't speak, I don't know what to say, God said, listen, I'm not asking you to come up with everything you're going to say. I'll give you the words to speak. I'll touch your mouth. I'll anoint you. You don't get hung up on the things that you think disqualify you. You don't get hung up on the ways that you don't see it in yourself yet. You just go and trust me to show up when you go. Okay, so he touched his lips, and he says, I put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and to tear down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. Here's the thing, this morning, you might not be called as a prophet. That might not be your thing. And we're going to talk about that in a second, specifically what your calling is. But make no mistake, God foreknew Jeremiah, and he also foreknew you. And while you may not be called to prophesy to nations, you have been called for the same purpose, to speak God's words and advance his kingdom. You are made to declare God's goodness, his mercy, his kindness, his love, and his graciousness. You are made to take his light into dark places. Isaiah chapter 61, 1 through 3. And I love this. In the NIV, this section is called the exaltation of the afflicted. The exaltation of the afflicted. It says, the Spirit of the sovereign Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of God's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, and to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. And notice, by the way, that Jesus also quotes this same passage in Luke chapter 4, verse 18. This, by the way, is your purpose. This is your calling. You were made. You can, as a matter of fact, you can take your name and insert it into that passage. The Spirit of the Lord is upon Leif Angel, for he has anointed me to preach and proclaim his good news to the poor, to set at liberty those who are captives, to bind up the brokenhearted. The Spirit of the Lord is upon Chaz Reed, for he has anointed Chaz Reed to preach the good news, the gospel to the poor, and to bind up the brokenhearted. This is for you. This is your calling. And you're going to ask, okay, but don't we have a specific calling, a specific purpose that is just for us individually? And the answer is yes, absolutely. But your purpose and your calling are never outside the scope of Luke 4:18. Never outside the scope of Luke 4:18. We get confused because we begin to mistake blessings and gifts for callings. We can say, well, I've got the gift, I've got a great voice, I can sing, therefore, my calling, my purpose is I'm supposed to go on The Voice and sing in Hollywood. And I'm supposed to sing songs that don't mean much and will be quickly forgotten. This is my purpose. It's about my fame and my elevation. We can think, okay, my calling is I'm a great athlete. My calling is I'm a great businessman. My calling is I'm an actor, I'm a whatever else. You can mistake and misplace your value, your purpose. You can mistake that for your giftings. But your giftings are not your purpose. They're vessels you were intended to use to glorify his name, to bring honor to who he is, to bring light into every dark place in the world. If we will then be faithful to communicate the goodness of our God, then we can trust, by the way, he might just choose to use you in Hollywood. He might send you to all the kinds of places. But it's not about your gift, it's about your purpose. And your purpose is, Luke 4:18, the Spirit of the Lord is upon you to proclaim the good news to the poor, to set the captives free, eyesight to the blind, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim the year of God's favor. That's your purpose. And any gifting that we mistake becomes a distraction that'll pull us away. Okay, so it's really a big deal that we understand your purpose always falls within the scope of Luke 4:18. Always, always. But the next question is, so how can I know what God's purpose, his specific calling is for me? I do not know, I cannot tell you, but I can tell you how to find it. I can tell you how to find your purpose. I can tell you how to find your calling, the one that's specific to you and not to me. The answer is serve. The answer is serve, by the way. Serve as unto God. This is my story. Because 25 years ago, Hope and I were asked to lead a small group at Covenant Church in Carrollton, Texas. Okay, we'll do that. And then we're asked to be a part of launching a brand new church that's now Elevate Life Church in Fresco, Texas. And we said, okay, we'll do that. And what does that look like? Well, first of all, we need you to set up and tear down, to unload the trucks in the morning, and to set all the equipment in place. And afterwards, you have to tear it back down and put it all back on the truck. Now, if we're not careful, we can say, but that has nothing to do with my gifts. Understand, if you know what your calling is, your gifts don't matter yet. They don't matter yet. So if we'll instead choose to serve wherever you are, whenever you go, with whatever the specific need is at that moment, serve as unto the Lord. Not, by the way, as your qualification to your next. I'm not looking for my promotion. If you're serving in the parking lot, if you're serving as usher greeter, if you're serving as the setup team or the audio team for the worship band because you're really wanting to qualify yourself so someday you can sing on, you're not serving as unto God. You're serving it for your own purpose, your own agenda. You have to be willing to serve wherever God plants you. If it's glamorous, if it's not glamorous, if it's something to do with my perceived gift set or not. Listen, I don't think anybody's gifted to unload a truck, but it's got to be done. Somebody's got to do it, because if somebody doesn't unload the truck and set the chairs in place and put the lights in place and put the cameras in place, we can all miss out on what God wants to do. He wants to proclaim his goodness and his love for his people. And if we are not willing to do whatever it takes in serving him, we'll never find what our purpose is, because he's saying, first and foremost, get involved where I'm going. The book Henry Blackaby wrote, it's called Experiencing God, and I've talked about it before. I'll talk about it again. Experiencing God specifically talks about mature Christians don't do what a lot of other people will do. Most people say, I need God to come to me. I need God to come to where I'm at right now. I need God to come invade my circumstance. I need God to come, you can get off track and try to make God a genie instead of your Lord and King. if we're always saying, God, to come where I'm at and serve my need right now, instead of saying, God, I'll go wherever you send me. Because Henry Blackaby in his book says, a mature Christian lifts his eyes up, finds where God is moving, and goes and gets involved however he can there. If you want God to use you, go where he's moving. Don't demand God come to you and set you up with a brand new thing. When we talk about serving, if we're not careful, we can start to seek positions rather than the heart. James Hutchins, who pastors New Life Community Church, is my mentor and friend in Frisco, Texas. I love me some James. And I had an opportunity to speak with him last week. And we were talking about a situation that had come up, and he said, Leif, you got to be careful. Anybody who introduces themselves with their title first, like, run away. Especially when we're talking about kingdom stuff. When they introduce themselves with the title first, run away. Here's the deal. Long before I was ever ordained as a pastor, as a matter of fact, when I was ordained as a pastor, my pastor at the time spoke over me and said, Leif, you were always a pastor. It's your heart. You have a pastor's heart. Now we're just going to make it official. But I learned that. I wasn't just born with a pastor's heart. I learned in serving God and serving his people and loving whoever he put on my team, that's where it was developed. So if you don't know what your purpose is, that's okay. If you know what your calling is, that's okay. Get involved and serve. And if you'll do that, your purpose will chase you down. Your purpose will chase you down. Your calling, your gifts will begin to identify themselves without you ever having to say, hey, listen, by the way, I have a gift of teaching. I need to be speaking from the podium. There's a reason Austin spoke last week. I've got literally more than a decade with that young man. I know what's in his heart. I had nothing but confidence when I said, hey, Austin, it's your turn to speak, because I know him. Because I know him, I have confidence. But, sometimes we say, listen, I'll serve in the parking lot, and I don't mind leading a small group, but when do I get a chance to speak up get up on stage and give a message? Faithfulness is such a big deal. We're not serving for a little window of time. We're not serving to elevate ourselves. I want us all to be like Austin. Austin's willing to serve wherever, whenever. He's willing to drive from, where do you live, Austin? Aubrey. But it's not just Aubrey. It's like the far side of Aubrey. He's way out there. And he drives here pretty much every week and sings for us, and he won't let me pay him. Yet. But understand that it's Austin's heart that qualifies him to speak. And it's the fact that he's proven himself faithful by serving first. He never sought the position. He sought opportunities to serve. And so when the time comes, it's my joy, it's my good pleasure to say, Austin, take the mic. Let's go, bro. You got this. And he killed it. So, serve wherever you are, however you can. Serve with the purpose of reaching people for God's kingdom. If you do that, your purpose will find you. But be careful, like I said before, if you are in a season where you're not exactly sure what your purpose is, you're in a dangerous time. You're in a dangerous spot. Why? Because when you don't know what your purpose is, the world will try to tell you what your purpose is. And it's never in line with what God has in mind for you. Other people will try to define you and then push you and bully you into living by what they see in you, not what God sees in you. Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 7, it says, during the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim of Judah and permitted him to take some of these sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia. He placed them in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and the other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men like me. Thank you, honey. Thank you. Wait. Okay, she's saying yes and you're saying no, bro. Come on. He said, make sure they're all well-versed in every branch of learning, gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. Then the king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for 3 years. So how long do you have to serve in the parking lot? Really, it's not 3 years. But remember, it's not just, flash in the pan, I'm going to serve. I actually had a good friend of mine. His name is Mark, and Mark began serving when I was at the other church. I was there for 20 years, and they put me in a position where I was overall servant leadership. So we had 2,200 servant leaders in the building on a Sunday. I'm not on a single Sunday. That'd be amazing. But we had a total of 2,200 servant leaders on teams. And Mark joined the parking lot team. And Mark's an amazing guy. I love him. We're still friends today. But when Mark said he was more hit than miss, or he was more missed than hit, he missed more Sundays on rotation than he made. But then one weekend we had our Dream Team Awards, where we recognize and honor the servant leaders. And Mark was a little bit nervous about the Dream Team Awards because he was just really afraid that they were going to call him up on stage and embarrass him for all of his good work in the parking lot. He had served like 3 times. He was supposed to serve like 6 or 7 times a year. Actually only made like less than half of them, but he was scared that don't call me out and embarrass me, Pastor. Don't call me out and embarrass me. Okay, when we say faithfulness is a big deal, they had to serve 3 years to qualify to serve in the palace. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen from the tribe of Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Listen to this. Daniel was called Belteshazzar. Hananiah was called Shadrach. Mishael was called Meshach. And Azariah was called Abednego. And by the way, that's just a pet peeve of mine. It's not Abednego, it's Abednego. Phonics matters. In American culture, we pick names because we like the way they sound or the way they go together. We pick names sometimes because we like alliteration. If you look at my kids, we have Callie and Caleb that both start with C, and then we waited almost 10 years to have Noel. And so if you go 10 letters down in the alphabet, you get to N. So there's Noel. That's not really why we picked Noel, but it's true. But we actually, our bent is when we're about to have a baby, we find names we like. And of course, I married a teacher who taught in the classroom for almost 20 years. And so I would come up with a name, and she would say, well, we're not naming our kid that name because I had a kid like that put paste in my seat. We're not, the kids, boys with that name are always a handful, and that's not what I'm looking for. But, our first was Callie, and so that was one of the very first names we could agree on that didn't have some kind of something from the classroom that's like, nope, not naming a kid Zach. And by the way, Zach's here this morning. Zach, you're awesome, buddy. But one of the names we talked about is like, Zach's a cool name. It's like, nope, boys with the name Zach are a handful. Zach, you're a handful, buddy. But I love you. So we pick those names because we like the way it sounds or the way the names go together, and then we check and see what it means and make sure it lines up and it's okay. But back in this culture, the meaning was way more important than the sound of the name. So you get some off-the-wall crazy names because they were more concerned about the meaning than they were the name. So name changes were a very big deal. They're also a big deal because it's also a measure of ownership. When the king was renaming the ones that were brought into his kingdom, there's a purpose behind it. Just like when we got our puppy, our Labradoodle, we named him Trooper. We got to name him. You didn't get to name him. We got to name him. Why? Because he's our dog, not your dog. So when the king says, I'm going to rename these 4 young men from the tribe of Judah, it wasn't just let me help you assimilate into our culture. This name is more keeping with the culture of Babylon and the Chaldeans than Mishael, Hananiah, and Azariah, and Daniel. So I'm going to give you some new names. It wasn't just about helping you settle in better. They gave them new names to mark a new revelation, that they would forsake their former faith and their former country and begin to identify themselves as Babylonians. The renaming was an attack against their purpose. You see, the Babylonians tried to co-opt the purpose of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or actually Mishael, Hananiah, and Azariah. You see, in Daniel, Hebrew means God is my judge. Belteshazzar, though, meant fair one, protect the king. Another translation says, preserve thou, O Bel, his life, or prince of Bel. Bel was the chief deity of Babylon and a god of beauty. Hananiah in Hebrew meant God, Yahweh, or God has been gracious. But Shadrach meant inspired or illumined by the sun god. Mishael in Hebrew meant who is what God is, or who is like our God. Meshach, though, means, in one translation, it says, I am despised, contemptible, and humiliated. Another translation, by the way, kept the me, or who is like, but instead of El, which was Hebrew for God, he dropped in Shak, which was short for Sheshach, which, by the way, was the goddess of the earth. This is significant. Hold on. Azariah in Hebrew meant Yahweh has helped, or the one whom God helps. Abednego means servant of Nebo, or another translation says servant of the shining fire. So what happened with the renaming of these four servants of God is that Babylonians substituted names that dedicated them to the service of their gods. See, all four names in Hebrew meant servants of God. Who is like our God? God is faithful. God is helped, the one whom God helps. God is my judge. All four names relate to the goodness of God, but when they're renamed, all four names now have to do with the Babylonian gods instead of God. More than that, when they renamed these four young men, they named them after the four chief gods of the Chaldean or Babylonian culture. So Bel was the chief god. Then there was a sun god. And there was the goddess of the earth. And then there's the goddess of the god of fire, of shining fire. So what happens is, if we're not careful, and this is relevant because we can listen to this and we can say, I can see that. I can see where that's the attack on their identity. I can see where that's the attack on their purpose. I can see it. I can understand it. I can see it happening back then in that place far away. But it's happening to you today. We get together with the men of Grace Point usually on a Saturday basis. We're not doing it this Saturday because we have the food distribution. But we get together with the men of Grace Point at Saturday mornings at Breaking Free Coffee Shop. And it always turns into a great conversation. The conversation this week had a lot to do with, as we come to election season and everything else, it had a lot to do with understand that the greatest threat to our nation, the greatest threat to our identity, the greatest threat to the success and the future of our nation is not some other army. We still have the biggest and baddest army out there. It's not something obvious. Instead, it's subtle and insidious. It's a small thing. And by the way, it seems innocent, it seems helpful, but there's something called metafilters. If you understand what metafilters are, they sound sweet. If you go on social media, any kind of social media, if you go onto websites, news sites, they try to feed you, they're studying you. What do they like? What are posts that they've liked? What is the content of their post? What are the things that they've clicked on or agreed with, hearted, favorited, retweeted, shared? And they're beginning to group you. And what's happening is, and this sounds so sweet, we're just going to show them more of the things they like. Isn't that nice? We're going to send them more and more news feeds and articles that they like. But what happens is, in effect, we become more and more and more indoctrinated down a path. So you begin to express, let's just say you're a conservative Republican, as an example. Not that you are, but you might be. But you begin to express that on social media however you express it. So they begin to send you more news feeds, more friend suggestions, more articles that they think you like that, by the way, agree with what you said you liked. But they don't leave you there. They take you further down the road because they're going to send you more articles about things you weren't even aware of. And oh, by the way, this is why you should be incensed and outraged. And it doesn't stop there because every one of those articles was also written with an angle that says anybody who doesn't agree with this is either evil or stupid. Yeah. This is obvious. Everybody should see it this way. And by the way, when you see an article like that on Facebook that agrees with your point of view, just know that another article on Facebook was sent to somebody else that agrees with their point of view. Yeah. But what happens is we get more and more and more polarized. What is our purpose under heaven? Our purpose under heaven is to proclaim the goodness of our God, His faithfulness, His strength, His favor. That's why we're here. But if we're not careful, just like the Babylonians, just like Ashpenaz did to these four young men, you begin to get pulled away. Remember, there was a chief god, Bel, and then there was the sun god, then there was the goddess of the earth, and then there's the god of fire, of shining fire. So here's the deal. You're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, you're on whatever your social media thing is, and you begin to get fed more and more stories that agree with what they think you like, and you get more and more polarized, because I'm only seeing the world from one perspective, and anybody who doesn't agree with this is either evil or stupid. So therefore, I become more and more dogmatic. And my purpose, I can say my purpose is to serve God, but if all my posts are about mask or no mask, BLM or ALM, defund the police or back the blue, you can go on and on and on and find these issues, and you become just dogmatically entrenched, and this is what I'm about. Let me tell you about me. I'm a smoker and I vote. You get so entrenched in this, you can talk about my purpose is to serve God, but look at what's been displayed in your life. Have you turned your life over to serving God's kingdom? My whole life is about this. Or is your whole life about your issues? We can become lost to our purpose in a seemingly subtle way. We become renamed. God's given you a purpose. How can you ever achieve your purpose if you're so convinced that everybody who doesn't agree with you is either evil or stupid and not worth your time, that you have no desire or drive to go reach them and tell them about a God who loves them, who wants to restore them and heal them and raise them up? Your purpose has nothing to do with your issues. I'm not saying you can't have a purpose or a viewpoint on mask or no mask or ALM or BLM, that's fine. But nothing defines you more than, over the top of, you are a child of God created in His image. For one reason, to make His name famous in the earth, to spread His kingdom, to advance His word, to show others they can be healed and restored and lifted up. You don't have to be a bondage. You don't have to be a prisoner. You can get up. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for He's anointed me to preach good news to the poor. This is your purpose. This is your calling. Anything else that doesn't align with Luke chapter 4, verse 18, you're missing it already. We get caught up in metafilters. We get caught up in our issues. Your issue never should supersede your calling and your purpose. And your calling and your purpose always come back to Luke 4:18. Don't get confused. Don't make it about your issues. I'm a smoker and I vote. Don't make it about your political leanings. I'm not saying you can't have a belief system. I'm not saying you can't know who you're going to vote for in November. That's fine. But when you rail on people, when you shout at people in Walmart for not wearing a mask, or tell people who are wearing a mask that they're sheep, here's what's hard to do. Don't try it. Here's something really hard to do. Find somebody that's wearing a mask in a store or in a restaurant and tell them they're a sheep. Find somebody who's not wearing a mask and tell them you're evil or inconsiderate. You're evil or stupid, one or the other. Which one is it? Oh, by the way, Jesus loves you. Try to make that left turn. You can't do it. You can't make that left turn. So what am I about? What am I proclaiming? Why does this matter? There's a phrase we use a lot. We use a lot of phrases as Christians, right? And sometimes we use half a phrase because we don't like the other half. The Lord's going to bless me, pressed down, shaken together, running over. But we forget the part that He says, give, and it shall be given. Oh, I don't like that part. Let's just do the other part that I like. Another phrase we say all the time is, for such a time as this. Guys, for such a time as this, isn't it great? For such a time as this. If you believe that, you have to consider. Now, I'm going to be very careful about something. I'm probably going to aggravate some people. I probably already have. Sorry, love you. I'm not trying to make you mad. I just want you to understand. Your purpose is not what you think it is sometimes. I have very good friends who study prophecy. I have a lot of good friends who study prophecy. I study prophecy. But be very aware. Any prophecy that causes you to walk in fear, see, a word of the Lord is going to come to you for one of a couple of reasons. Correct you, direct you, or encourage you. Yeah. That's it. That's right. Any word from the Lord that causes you to operate in fear, you need to evaluate, number one, is that a word from the Lord at all? Or number two, am I hearing it right? God, help me hear it better. Okay. To put this in perspective, this week, there was a peace treaty signed between the United Arab Emirates, and Israel. You don't have to study prophecy very hard at all to understand. We're in the last days. These are the end times. Now, I want to be very clear about that. What I'm not saying is it's next week. It's next month. As a matter of fact, there was a book that came out back in 1988, and the name of the book was 88 Reasons Why Jesus Will Come Back in 1988. Heads up, we're all still here. The Bible is very clear that no man will know the hour or season of his return. But this book starts off with a gotcha kind of thought process. Well, he said we wouldn't know the hour or season, but he didn't say we couldn't know the year. Come on now. Like Jesus is playing gotcha games. Like, ha-ha. Come on now. So I'm not saying that I think it's going to be this week or next month or next year. I don't know when it's going to be. Here's why I'm not concerned. If he comes back and finds me serving his kingdom, proclaiming his name, I have nothing to worry about. If instead, I'll be like the four maidens, they're outside the wedding, who let the oil and the lamps go out. Why did they let the lamps go out? Why did they let the oil and the lamps run out? Because they were sure the groom was coming soon. But it took a little longer than they expected, so they let their lamp go out. If we're so anxiously looking for his return that we stop doing the work, when he comes back, he's not going to be pleased with what he finds. Yeah. If instead, I understand these are the last days, what's my response? Serve. Serve like crazy. Serve all the time. Serve everywhere I can. Serve. What if I think he's not coming back for 6 months? Serve. What if it's 5 years? Serve. What if it's tomorrow? Serve. What if it's 1,000 years? Until I die, I'm serving. And that's how I'm confident I'll hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. Let me make you ruler over much. How does that happen? How does that work? Serve. Yeah. Be active and engaged in serving. But here's the thing. If we understand that we're seeing prophetic signs come to pass, there's not that many left. If we're seeing prophetic signs come to pass and we're sure that we're in the end days, and yet we also use phrases like, for such a time as this. I want you to consider something. Here's a thought, and I hope this rocks you like it rocked me. Listen up. Listen really good. Lean in for me. Everybody lean in for me. Okay, thank you. In the last moments of a football game, ball's on the 1 yard line. In the last moments of a football game, when the ball's on the 1 yard line, do you want your A team on the field, or your backup to the backup on the field? When you say for such a time as this, and you also include in that the very concept of we're in the last days, God has chosen you for this hour in this place. Oh my Lord! Wait a minute. What? Don't you want Moses or Jeremiah, or don't you want Israel? Don't you want David? Don't you want somebody besides me? Surely it's not me. No, God chose you for this season in this place. There's somebody you can reach that I can't reach. God put his A team on the field right now, and guess what? You're a part of it. You got to stand up. We have to walk it out. And you know what? We can't just talk about it. We have to walk it out. You were born with a purpose and a calling. It's to make his name great in the earth and declare the goodness of our God. For such a time as this, he put you on the field. Don't put the ball down. Don't say it must be somebody else. God put you on the field for such a time as this. You were born with a destiny and a purpose. It's time to go. We can't play. Listen, come next Saturday. Love on people. Touch people. Put your arms around some people who are hungry and need some food and need some peace and need some reassurance. It's serving. Serve however you can, wherever you can, for as long as you can, in all the ways you can, and trust your purpose will chase you down. You won't be able to get away from it. That's it. That's my message this morning. Okay, let me take that just for a second. I want to close with something else. I said that, I was thinking, but wait a minute, I had one more point. I got fired up. Sorry about that. I told you it was going to be a super shouty day. Next week, yeah, more of the same. So, if we're not careful, our culture, our unhealthy people in our lives, our own fears and insecurities will try to rename us, to steal our identity and make it something much, much less, to rob us our purpose. When culture shifts, you have to know who you are. The most important thing that you allow yourself to be identified is who God says you are, and to understand that you are no accident no matter who said anything other than that. You are no accident. I don't care who said what. You are no accident. For such a time as this, you are no accident. You were custom designed and built by God for a divine purpose. You were chosen for this moment in history and in this place to make an impact for his kingdom. It says in Psalm 138, verse 7 through 8, it says, though I walk in the midst of trouble, you preserve my life. You stretch out your hand against the wrath of my enemies, and your right hand delivers me. Listen to verse 8. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Your steadfast love, O Lord, endures forever. Remember what we started with. Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid. Don't be shaken. Be very strong and courageous, for I'll go with you. Every step. I'll go before you every step. I come behind you as your rear guard every step. Step out with purpose. Step out with calling. And serve like he's coming back tomorrow, because he might be. Yeah. All right? Now that's the end of the message. This time I mean it. That was the end.